basically it's heightened sense of awareness that's aware of its self-judging. But there's also within judgment, it's not to say we shouldn't judge, because we discern as human beings. So there's a difference between discernment and judgment. And so it's being wise enough to know how you want to act with compassion. And so sometimes it might be fully embracing who you are, and sometimes it might be allowing construct to wash over you. And then that's that kind of always coming back to balance, presence.
Welcome to the Mindfulness Experience podcast. I'm your host, Keith Fiveson. On this episode, I had a fun and interesting time speaking with Dr. Joey Weber, who's a leading expert in the field of mindfulness and equanimity. Having spent years on the topic, he developed tools that help people cultivate greater inner peace and emotional resilience. In his latest book, Why Mindfulness is Not Enough, Unlocking Compassion with Equanimity, he describes how mindfulness alone is not enough to unlock our full potential. He explains how we can cultivate greater equanimity to overcome the judgments and challenges that often come up when we deal with others. Dr. Joey Weber has developed one of the world's first psychometric scales that focus solely on the construct of equanimity, the Equanimity Barriers Scale, or EBS. It helps individuals better understand, develop, and strengthen their capacity for equanimity by identifying judgments. If you're looking to deepen your understanding of mindfulness and expand your ability to be compassionate toward yourself and others, you don't want to miss this exciting episode with Dr. Joey Weber. Hey, Joey.
Hey.
What is happening, Joey? What is going on, man? How you doing?
Wow. I want to be greeted like that all the time. That's a great greeting, isn't it?
Hey, yeah, that's the way we do it here at the Mindfulness Experience. Welcome to the Mindfulness Experience. Joey, I want to say I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. You are a lecturer over at the University of Bolton. You're an equanimity teacher. You do some research. You wrote a book recently, which I read, and I have to say, after I read it, I felt like, I was better for it, because you talk about why mindfulness is not enough and unlocking compassion with equanimity. So, I always talk about mindfulness is like the bird and the wings of the bird, or, compassion and equanimity and wisdom. So I want to hear from you, what is equanimity? Because it's a big word that not a lot of people are really familiar with. Is it compassion? Is it, and how do we fly with that? How do we use mindfulness with that?
So what bird are we talking? Seagull or what?
An eagle. Fly like an eagle. Yeah.
Okay.
Time keeps on ticking into the future.
So the eagle, right? Everyone talks about two wings.
Yes.
What about the body that's connecting the wings? The middle bit, the back, the vertebrae. Equanimity, the bridge. This is it sounds silly, but in one way it's quite serious. It's like, wisdom and compassion.
Right.
The connector, the embodier is equanimity to me. And that's what I felt wasn't as much in the
Wait. So what you're saying is that compassion is one wing, wisdom is the other wing, and mindfulness is normally used as the body. But you're saying the structure, the whole framework of the body is really equanimity. Is that pretty much what you're saying? Yeah.
It could be. If we go down this analogy, I don't see why that doesn't work. I mean, we could put mindfulness as the beak or the head of the bird. When we do equanimity, when we go in the body scan, straight away, we're looking at sensations, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. That's tapping into equanimity to some extent. And I guess there's been a lot of implicit equanimity going on in current mindfulness, but not enough explicit stuff going on. So that's why, It's 2022, and we're having a discussion about what is equanimity, where is it if it was on a bird, because there's lack of clarity around that. But
Right.
I would say as a framework, it could make up a large portion of the bird.
And regardless of the bird or not, I think the real question is do we need equanimity in the world, and is there a place for it? And I would say, given our current collective trauma, given the problems that we're having around the world, where there is division, there is separatism, there is, there's really there's ADD, there's attention deficit disorder. There's no real conversations that are happening in a very big way about bringing mindfulness or being mindful about how we're really developing our society overall, how we're really doing things overall. So it seems to me that equanimity really should be the cornerstone of, let's just talk. Let's just have a conversation. Let's just be nice. Like the Dalai Lama said when they asked him about his religion, he said, kindness is my religion.
Spot on. I mean, yeah, that what he's doing there is just cutting through all the, all the kind of drama and saying, look, the similarity between all of us is kindness, and we've all got it. And so I think I'm glad you said that, Keith, about the conversation and the social element to it, because I totally agree in that we have to be really honest with ourselves. And we're all very judgmental. We're all very divisive. We're all very separate. We love to talk about compassion and universal compassion and all that lot. But I think our compassionate taps it's not completely overflowing. It's always turned off on the people we don't like. So we need equanimity for that, which is why it acts as the bird's back, because it connects these ideas together of, like, we can't just be compassionate to our friends and family, if we're practicing, we need to extend these parameters, and we need to go all out in the world. And if everyone was doing that from each cornerstone, there'd be a meeting of kind of beauty, in my opinion.
So within the space of equanimity, I'll go back to that analogy, the bird, the wings, the left, the right, and using that as the sort of the conceptual framework. Okay. We've got a lot of people who are on the left, we've got a lot of people who are on the right, and yet from the viewpoint of the body, the conversation, we're tearing each other apart in a very big way. There's and who's paying the price? Society is paying the price, the world's paying the price, Mother Nature, the environment, the animals, the water system, the ecosystem. I mean, all of these things are paying the price simply because we can't say, I may not agree with you, but I respect your right to say it. Let's see where we do agree. We all, as I say, I've traveled around a lot and, throughout the world. And I always say, everywhere people just want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want food, shelter, clothing, water, and they want someone to love them. They just want to be loved, and they want to love someone. Isn't that really at the heart and soul and spirit of who we are as human beings?
Yeah, exactly. And when you were talking about that, and I was thinking, yeah, it's really true. We never kind of developed past that playground mentality of not sharing or only hanging out with the people that gave us some form of approval, or acting in ways in which we would become accepted by whoever. And I think it's just led to a mass kind of neuroses that we find it very, very difficult to authentically, first and foremost, be who we are. And then secondly, connect authentically to others without the masks, without the social masks. And that is what equanimity does, because it breaks down the barriers of our biases. It looks directly at our judgments, the way in which we have been constructed socially. And we can then make conscious choices. Do we, appreciate why we're judging the way we are, or do we want to make change?
So you're a clinical psychologist, and you've developed one of the
shaking my head there at the clinical psychologist. Not formally, no.
Not formally, but you're working within the university setting, and you've developed the psychometric scale. Is it the Equanimity Barriers Scale, the EBS? Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so that's maybe where my where my thought process is because that is a psychometric scale that really helps individuals understand. Tell me, before I say what it helps individuals understand, you tell me what it helps individuals to understand. I don't want to take the wings out of your sails.
We're liking these wing analogies. Which wing's out my sail now? The left or the right?
It's both. It's both, man. You are the bird. You're flying
I'm free falling bird now.
Like an eagle. Yeah. Go there. Go for it.
Okay, so it all started because when I looked at quite a lot of the psychometrics used in mindfulness research, a lot of the bias was towards attention and awareness, and there wasn't a great deal that focused on the other kind of aspect of it, which is more towards the non-judgment, openness, curiosity. I mean, for sure there were items there, but there was nothing concrete. And so there was not this term equanimity as well, which was understood. So I thought about, what's the best way to go at this to make common sense, for mass understanding. And for me, it was to create a kind of judgment model. So why do we judge the way we do? Broadly speaking, because of course we can't get into the intricates, subtleties of it all. So the Equanimity Barriers Scale is a series of items that describe how judgmental you may be, or how aware of your own biases you are. So there's 4 kind of subscales to it that essentially, that is like the construct of self, and because of that construct, we judge things the way we do. And more awareness to that, what it showed was when this scale was measured against other psychometric scales, what it showed was if a person has higher barriers to equanimity, then they also have a higher propensity of anxiety and depression. But if a person has lower barriers, then they have higher mental well-being. So it correlates with other pre-existing measures. So it's a valid measure from a scientific perspective. Of course, now the research actually needs to be done on people, and there needs to be lots and lots. Well, I mean, that research was done on people, but what I mean is it needs to be measured in specific cohorts. Like let's do a mindfulness intervention and let's measure how many barriers to equanimity they have at the end of it. That type of thing. So that's essentially what it is. It's a little model that is self-construct.
So if I want to see just how judgmental I am without having to ask my family, which would give me an honest appraisal of that. But the point being is I could go ahead and use the scale, the EBS, the Equanimity Barriers Scale, and that would give me some feedback. It would be my psychological feedback mirror. We talked about that mirror in the book. And I want to hear more about the book, but that would give me that insight to say, okay, well, maybe what I think about is not really, it's not really valid. Maybe my reality is I have some cognitive distortions in my realistic appraisal, right?
Yeah, totally. It's like a map. I see it as a conceptual map. Look at, by answering these questions, you can determine how much propensity there is for you to be judgmental in certain arenas, from socially or innate, or when you're reflecting, things like that. And I think the idea was that, from mindfulness, I don't know what one of the big messages I got was that we are not necessarily our thoughts. That we can observe thoughts come in and then passing, and then they come and they go. The majority of those are negative, etc. So there's a lot
bias.
of negative bias, and a lot of self-criticism, low self-compassion, and it all comes from this cascading, relentless wave of thoughts. So a little bit like that. But we can now look and say, well, I'm not necessarily my judgments either. If we go onto the feeling level, am I my feelings? I mean, actually, you can see that we might have constructed our feelings. So if I was brought up in a household that didn't like a certain type of person, then of course, growing up, I would also have that in my body and mind. Right. So I might elicit that, which of course hardens the neural circuit pathway. Right. So of course, I elicit those judgments and reinforce it all the time. And so it takes quite a magic moment if you want to go, hang on a minute. Do I like the way I'm judging?
Mm.
What effect is this having on people?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, someone told me that I'm coming across quite, I don't know, racist.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, you can start to examine. So I think it's a good starting point to examine self.
Right.
It opens up
Great.
questions.
I like that. I like that because, one of the things that I'm very aware of is, cognitive reframing or cognitive distortions, and really having a sense of, not everything is as it seems, and your perceptions really are the reality that you live by. And if you want to change your life, change your perceptions, or if you want to change your life, change your story. Because and what you're really talking about is sort of a cognitive narrative reframing, if you will, taking a look at, what is your story? What's the story that you think of who you are, or who you think you are? And let's break that down. Let's break it down into a reality. Are you your thoughts? Are you your senses? Are you your body? Are you your beliefs? And you get down into that sort of shunyata moment, which is, everything in the nothingness, I'm neither my thoughts, my feelings, I'm nothing. I'm really nothing but what I create through that process. It really I want to get back to the bird, Joey.
Yeah, it's safer in the bird, isn't it?
It was safer in the bird.
I lost track of who was speaking with it.
So, so let me ask you, you come from a Buddhist family, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you were raised Buddhist?
Yeah, I was raised Buddhist. I mean, I was around a lot of Buddhist cultural stuff, and aware of teachers, and had teachings, etc. But there wasn't much there was never any forced practice or anything, or type of, you are a Buddhist. There was not that language behind it. Right. I just grew up being privy to a lot of Buddhist artwork, for one. My dad's Tibetan iconographer, Tibetan Buddhist iconographer, and also my mum's a Buddhist teacher. So I'm around it, and I'm sure some of their kind of ethics and values from Buddhism came down upon me. Yeah. But sometimes I'm like, am I a Buddhist? I don't know. I don't like the labels, because, then it creates division, unfortunately. As soon as we label and categorize, then we've cut ourselves off to a lot of others. So I now like to say, look, I'm an open secular scientist who's pretty much into everything.
Yeah. I think on one of my profiles, I say it says religion. I says, oh, really? And then I go quantum physics, let's just. So from a viewpoint of Buddhism, though, I want to talk about that in terms of equanimity. Equanimity is one of the four immeasurables, or four great virtues, along with compassion, loving kindness, and sympathetic joy, that the Buddha taught his disciples to cultivate. And one of the things that was said was the four simple ways to maintain equanimity. And I want to get your perspective on those four ways. I want to hear you talk about, the Buddha for a moment.
What ways?
So one of the first ways was, remember that equanimity is key and always prevails. The second way was to breathe, to recite an equanimity mantra, and walk away. So walk away, and maybe I want to understand that a little bit more. And then visualize your vagus nerve, breathe, and let it go. And then the fourth way is physical activity and meditation are pathways to equanimity. And of course, make equanimity the golden rule, just create the space. So what's your perspective on those four simple ways to maintain equanimity? And I say four simple ways because in some way, it's not all that simple, right? We've got to remember the four ways. And I like Buddhism from that viewpoint. There's always a list to remember. There's another list. Oh, I got to remember that list. But, it seems to me like it's just about breathing and just remembering your own presence. And in reading the book, your book really talks a lot about presence, around just being present and aware to your own presence.
I think the presence whole side of it is the mindfulness, right? So the first one, remembering, like being mindful of the fact that, we're trying to elicit equanimity. So mindfulness is in everything, in all Buddhist teachings and the West. It's like, there is presence everywhere. And a lot of people are mindful at certain times when they do sports and activities and things like that, which makes a lot of sense, around the body, that when we're truly in like this kind of flow state, or kind of just in the zone, as we probably talk about it, there is nothing else, and we're completely heightened and perfected in whatever action we're doing at that stage. So those two seem to be quite, self-explanatory around the fact that, we need to be mindful of and remember of that this is happening. I think with these 4 immeasurables, it was, for me, I wanted to create like an equanimity that was more understood, like commonly, because, the word equanimity, everyone's like, what? It's abstract and it's a bit mystical.
Is it about horses or what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not about equine. It's not the equine aspect of it. It's really, people don't really understand what is that word? What is that? What does that mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And so when I did look at some literature, there was a Tibetan master called Longchenpa, I think, and he actually said that equanimity should be done first before the other immeasurables, and then the rest kind of fall into place. And I liked that because it was actually speaking to me that equanimity need to be really cognitively understood as a separate entity, because we can kind of like, blur some of all this stuff because it's all got similar flavors, compassion or wisdom type thing. But actually, I wanted to make it an isolated, separate construct that we could study. And so that's why I think also, as mindfulness was, it was kind of taken into a secular domain and said, look, what happens if we try it here? That's the same way as I want to do with equanimity. It's like, look, this is what it means. What happens if we try it here? And also we can measure it as well by creating new tools like the EBS.
So let me ask you, is because, when I look at equanimity, and I mean, it's a very interesting, what you've written about is incredibly interesting from the viewpoint of like, what is it? We're asking the question of what is it, right? And, in Zen, we talk about coming back to the still point, that still point, that seer, that witness, that ability to be the witness. And there is this quality, I think, of equanimity that really is about being the witness, about being in the still point and seeing, coming back to that still point again and again and again, and being the seer and the one who is the witness to the experience. And the way we get there, obviously, great. We get there through compassion. We get there through breathing exercises, which is really what mindfulness is. It's the witness of the breath, right? It's that ability that really anchors us because it always is. It's the eternal moment. The breath brings us back to that eternal moment, which only is in the moment. That's always whatever is, right now. And so I just want to hear from you. Is that, in your view, in your practice, is it about being the witness, that still point, that calm, that point of like, seeing the calm in the lake, before the rock drops in,
I think that's a lot of the definitions and stuff that I looked at were all about that, being calm and during tumultuous minds, and equanimity stops you from being strayed from one motion to the other, and it's definitely part of that. So there is this calmness there, this calm presence, but it's to me a little bit about it comes from a place of wisdom, as in exactly that you can see the bigger picture, and so you kind of aware enough to be you're mindful enough of being aware of your self-construct and how it's changing over time and how it's relating to whatever experience or phenomenon it is. And I was listening to a podcast just before, actually, and it was like on meta awareness. And so, sometimes translated into awareness of awareness. I think Mongia Rinpoche. So I think basically its heightened sense of awareness that's aware of its self judging, But there's also within judgment, it's not to say we shouldn't judge, because we discern as human beings. So there's a difference between discernment and judgment. And so it's being wise enough to know how you want to act with compassion. And so sometimes it might be fully embracing, who you are. And sometimes it might be allowing construct to wash over you. And then that's that kind of always coming back to balance, presence, calm in the lake. So yeah, because it can get kind of like, it doesn't matter if it's stormy out there or whatever, but you better remain equanimous. But it's also, you can go micro level to looking at, well, what is coming up for you at the moment, likes, dislikes, and neutralities. That's related to yourself. So you can look at it quite micro, but also quite macro. And I think the thing that gives off is really probably too much of the same in terms of opposition, and brings it back to center. So there's a lot of quotes that talk about opposites and things like that. The definitions that I've gone for are more towards like, non-reactivity of your own discrimination faculties, which is like dislike neutrality. So you can respond with compassion for self and others. So it's like a heightened awareness of what you're bringing to the table. And then when recognizing that when someone else is behaving, that they're doing it from a judgmental point of view as well. So the least we can do is give them patience and compassion as well, because it's like, they might not know why they're doing what they're doing. And it's, take some of the personalization out of it all from both sides, really. So I think it speaks to both that type of meta-awareness, this kind of idea of being calm no matter what the situation's going on, but also on a micro level to looking at, well, what is coming up for me based upon my self-construct at this moment. So presence is in all of that.
So how do we deal with this whole area of because what you're talking about, that awareness of the awareness really is, it takes a good mindfulness practice, in my experience, to really have that awareness of that. We talk about recognition and choice, or recognition response, or stimulus response, and where the practice really comes in is the ability to have that, in samadhi, that sense of meditation, that sense of the gap where we have recognition and choice. We have that choice so that we can live a better life. We can have a more conscious life. Is that where the equanimity comes in, that sense of space? Because there are people that are living lives of misperception, avidya. They have kleshas, they have afflictive emotions, they have, reactive actions, they're living their traumas, things happen with traumas, and they're living a compulsive life. They're drinking, drugging, eating, sexing, spending, and they're not really they're not really into equanimity right now, because, they don't have time for it. So from your view, like, how does that fit in? Is it for everyone, or is it just for some?
Well, you just listed everything I did last weekend. No, it's
like in one weekend, I just listed it all.
Well, it was 1 hour. It was a mad hour. It's like, I don't know. It's sometimes I think there's too much mystical type of language around, floaty language around how we apply this. It's like we're human beings and we're quite intelligent, and we can just utilize some of what we know to become more conscious and present and be more aware. And so I think a good thing for equanimity really is that actually it goes beyond your likes and your dislikes and your neutralities, your attachment, aversion. So in one sense, if you really had it, you would view every single experience equanimously. It doesn't mean like, you're letting go of any of that. You're facing it, you're embracing it, you're being with it, but you also have the wisdom to let it go, and you're not affected by what it is the next time. So in some ways, it's like, it's for absolutely everyone, because everyone's living a subjective human existence that, is responding to experiences. So it's a way of responding to experience. So it doesn't matter whose experience is better than others, because there's some people that live in, they're millionaires and they're utterly sad.
sad. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're living this compulsive life, and they don't know how to get off
yeah,
the hamster wheel. Yeah,
exactly. Wrapped up in fame and
right,
fortune and praise
right.
and all that lot.
How
And so
many
it's kind of,
likes I have?
yeah,
How many people like me or not? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, that's
And
me on a
and no one
Sunday.
can really like me because they all like me for my money or my
Yeah,
stuff or my
yeah,
personality. I mean, you look at like someone like Anthony Bourdain who was living the life, man. This guy, was traveling around the world. And
oh, yeah,
what was that? He was traveling around the world, eating at the most incredible places, like doing, and that was like, it wasn't enough. It was like he
mm,
it was so sad, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
He had to end
It's
it all.
this, exactly. It's like we don't know the
Mm,
response to stimulus that's occurring in an individual. We don't know the level of human neuroses that's
mm,
occurring.
mm-hmm,
And I remember listening to Pema Chodron talk
mm,
once, and she said, never underestimate the level of human neuroses.
mm,
And it really like speaks to me, that because I've also
mm-hmm,
seen in people in poverty and abject poverty
mm-hmm,
that are actually, studies have been done to show
right.
that they're apparently some of the happiest.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah, the
like for
happiness
us,
index. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
the happiness index. So it's like that doesn't make sense, right? Because happiness is around materialism, it's around having space and
Mm,
eating well. So what
mm-hmm.
is it? What's happening here? And maybe it's a natural thing that we've
Mm-hmm.
all got, but in
Mm-hmm.
this kind of lifestyle, or the more pleasures there are, the more kind of deeply seductive they are, and
Mm,
actually that creates a sense of suffering,
mm,
rather than a coming back to downright to earth and being like,
mm-hmm.
we're humans, we're trying to make the best of it, we're
Mm-hmm.
going to respond equanimously, we know things pass, we know
Mm-hmm.
suffering, but we know we're always also going to get through that.
Mm. So, like, if I take a look at like the cycle of freedom, this whole idea of freedom, this whole idea of basically, recognizing that, it's all story, it's all narrative, it's all kind of construct that we're creating. What I hear from you is I hear the ability to kind of be the narrator of your own story and to be that narrator with a calm, clear, kind voice that kind of says, okay, this doesn't have to be hard.
Mm,
Take it easy.
mm,
These people are for you. They're not against you. Or, let's step away from that guy because maybe they're not really for you, but you don't have to wish them harm. You can wish them
mm.
well far away from you. That kind of a thing.
Oh, totally, yeah. Because
Mm,
equanimity towards others when you do the
mm,
meditation, because it's a different meditation to breath and body awareness. You're focusing on people. You're putting the social in the whole mindfulness, really,
mm,
and you're focusing on people. And I do a lot of friends, enemies, strangers meditation
mhm,
where you
mhm,
equalize feelings,
mm,
and that feeling actually by going beyond yourself, but
mhm,
beyond your self-referential kind of story of who I
mhm,
am,
mhm,
you actually benefit because you probably elicit kind of a meta awareness that in
mhm,
turn makes you feel more connected and in
mm,
harmony with nature and
mm,
people and others.
mm,
So you're feeling like that by getting away from yourself.
mhm,
So what does it shows that yourself's the problem, right? So
right.
if we all related to ourselves with a
Mhm,
little bit more, soft, kind, openness, self-compassion there, but also we related to stimulus the same
mhm,
way,
mhm,
that it's, because it takes away that whole poor me trip,
mm,
this only happens to me, why I do this, I've done that,
mhm,
and it's a kind of constant barrage of
right.
experience. And of course it sounds quite nice for me to say this right now because there's nothing major going on in my life,
Mhm,
but if my someone was dying that I knew, and I'd
mhm,
just lost my job, and I'd had 5 kids to raise,
mm,
and
mhm,
the rent was due, then I'd be in complete hell. And
mhm,
equanimity is not going to be this magic pill that we take, and it's like, all right, well, it doesn't matter because I'm now equanimous
mhm,
to it.
mhm.
We're still going to be like, oh,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
but
yeah,
we'll
yeah.
just. I think it also allows us to bounce back better. And to be honest, it comes reconceptualizes resilience, and I
Mhm,
think it makes us totally resilient. So
mm,
it's like, yeah, whoa, shit's hit the fan,
mhm,
but quicker than normal, I'm now back on the track.
mm, mhm. Yeah, it's very interesting because there's as you well know, there's a big push into this whole area of psychedelics. And
Yeah.
I've had a few people on the show that really are into psychedelic assisted therapy. I'm doing some studying on that myself. And, I think the whole idea is to be able to step back and take a look at our traumas. And you had mentioned, trauma. And I think one of the challenges with, we're dealing with, Tim Hubble talks about, we're in a collective trauma soup. We're born into the soup of trauma, and then we're told that it's normal, and then we're colonized in a way that really tells us that, go to school, learn we're given the doctrine, we're given all the information, and then if somehow we say, hey, I can't handle this, this isn't, I'm having a nervous breakdown, I can't deal with all this trauma, then we're somehow told that we're not normal, right? We're not we're not keeping up with the Joneses, so I'm just wondering, from your viewpoint, talk a little bit about the exercises and how, they may or may not complement or work with people who are dealing with trauma. Like, as you expressed, we've got, cause and effect, there's the past, there's the future. How do we be present with, what's going on in the moment, and, really have that meta awareness of equanimity? Your views, obviously you don't have the magic bullet on it, but I'd love your thoughts about it, and like your experience in some way.
Well, I think that, it's the idea of kind of emotional expression and becoming aligned to the trauma. First of all, a massive part of trauma is recognizing that it's there. And so I think some work around trauma is needed. I wouldn't ever recommend to someone, go and meditate on it, or go and try and be mindful. When something's really happening bad to you, the last thing anyone wants to do is, become present with the body and the sensations, because it's overwhelming. So I think in a period of kind of reflective equanimity would actually be quite helpful, because it recognizes it's you being able to place yourself in context in relation to the experience, and then you can kind of observe how much of a narrative that's reinforced upon you, which is then playing out, and it's actually exacerbating and never relinquishing you from past traumas.
You go back around and around in the circle. It's traumatic self-identification. It's repetition of it, and then you're living one life, you're back in samsara, then you're living one life again and again and again. You can't get out of samsara. You're on the wheel.
Yeah. You're on the wheel, and it's a little bit like, recognizing that you're on the wheel is quite therapeutic, and just understanding that the human experience isn't plain sailing. It isn't fluffy. Now how much we try and make it all quite sweet and nice. There's human suffering going on there, and so the least we can do is kind of soften the experience to it all with the kind of antidote of equanimity, really kind of soothing quality, because you're able to look at yourself a little bit more objectively, but crucially with not then drifting into dissociation, which most of us do when we completely almost create a different identity that's separate from the body, and then we're acting out all kind of weird games or whatever before it gets too late and there's some kind of breakdown. But really, equanimity binds you to kind of your self construct in a healthy distance. So it's safe to go there. It's not like you're in the moment, but you're also not like, whoa, who's that? Because that could lead to some other kind of
disassociation, disembodiment. You're suddenly reenacting old traumas. Suddenly you're doing it in a different way. You were traumatized as a kid, and now you're traumatizing kids as an adult. That could be like a whole sad story. Let me just ask you, I'm really aware of the time, and, our time seems like it's just flown by here. But let me ask you a question, because I think there's something in Western society, and I really admire, the Buddhists, certainly the Tibetan Buddhists more than anything, because they've written a book on dying. Death and dying, the Book of the Dead, and really understanding age and death. And, I wonder, from your viewpoint, what does death or the recognition of death have to do, in your view, with this ability to accept not only old traumas, but maybe change the name of the game? I mean, people are dying, and, we're not, certainly here in the US, over 1 million people died, and we haven't really recognized all those people. We really haven't done a memorial service at all. We haven't really kind of touched, and it seems like it's just sort of, we brush it under the carpet, and we really honor youth. We don't necessarily honor age or wisdom or those who came before us to go ahead and make the world what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hell of a question, that. I mean, I think when you're mindful, and you're aware of the moment, and when you really get into it, you kind of become aware of the fact that we're dying. Every moment's kind of dying as soon as it's experienced. So it's kind of awful. And I think it really, it's awful in one way, but then it opens up a new door to experience and to acceptance, that actually you realize that your old way of trying to make everything permanent and fixed and everything, it wasn't working for you really, which is why you behaved in certain ways and have got certain, neuroses or nostalgia. So for some extent, mindfulness really helps wake you up to the fact of who you really are. And of course, when you become a bit more attuned, then you're like, wow, I am going to die. All my family's going to die. And it's like, then you start to really wrestle with acceptance properly, because we can all intellectually think about these things. Go, I accept things. Yeah. But when it comes, I don't know, it might sweep you off your feet. And I think I identify with being fairly young still. So I've always felt that I don't have to worry about that for ages. But what I am really conscious of is my parents dying and what effect that'll have on me. And so it's a little bit bittersweet, and especially if I've got a child, and want more children, is that they're just going to, age and gradually die themselves. And I'm witness to their kind of aging, and, so it's in one way heartbreaking, but being human and being kind of positive and knowing how much good and potential there is, we can have a whole different relationship with that narrative. And as you say, to some extent, learn deep acceptance. And I guess this is where freedom might come in terms of, feeling fully free to embrace the world, who I want to be, not with all the games that I've inherited, but authentically at some point, acting out in the world and trying to elicit some form of positive change becomes my kind of vision. And I guess deep acceptance and recognizing that grief is needed, and it might take a long time,
I love that.
We're all grieving all the time, really. There's always grief, because my childhood's gone. And, I look back and it breaks my heart, really, sometimes. Family home, it's changed. Everything's changed, and it's like, whoa. What is all this? It's kind of a story. They're ghosts, they're memories. I can't access them anymore. They've helped create who I am, but they've completely gone. If I can't accept that, that's going to really turn me up and churn me up in bits, which it has, and it will do. But we're on a process.
Yeah, it's that one of my favorite books are Ernst Becker's The Denial of Death. And, it really is at the heart, I think, of Buddhism, is really understanding that we are all dying, and there is this denial of death that we have, that somehow thinks that we're going to live forever, and somehow thinks that, like the present is always going to be, it's always going to be what it is, and I'm always going to be who I am. And, all those kind of, distorted thinking processes really lead to a world that is not cherished or held sacred. As you say, every moment we're getting closer and closer, these are sacred breaths, these are sacred moments.
Yeah, and if you look at death as one extreme, to what's the opposite of death? Life.
So if you hold death, you can live life.
As the moment you fully accept it, we embrace it, we live it. And it's again, equanimity speaks to these opposites, right? To this center ground. Acknowledge, accept, but don't over identify with it, become lost in it, because otherwise your whole life becomes a tragedy. And again, don't go to the opposite and over kind of identify with life and deny death, that your whole life becomes a delusion. So somewhere in the middle is this kind of raw, wise, compassionate view, equanimous view in relation to death. And it's about opposite. So none of this would be happening if there was no death. And if you like what's happening, it's magical.
Well, I got to say, this conversation has been magical in and of itself. I really have enjoyed it. Your book is really good. It really helped me to be more aware of my own judgments and really my own constructs, if you will. And I would definitely recommend folks to go ahead and buy it, to go ahead and pick it up and learn not only about you, but learn about equanimity and how it may apply in their own life. So if people want to buy the book or get a hold of you, how would they go about doing that, Joey?
Well, you've got the major retailers out there like Amazon's, etc. It's always on there. If anyone gets it from these places, I'm relying on reviews. So I'd really appreciate that connection as well, to actually review it. I quite like to be active on either LinkedIn or Instagram and go by the name of at Dr. Joey Weber, all one word. Weber's got one B because it's German. And I put out my latest courses. I've got a course called Equanimity-Based Compassionate Action. One's running now, and that's where we look at the science of equanimity and differentiation from mindfulness, and then look at how we can look at the construct of our biases, overcome them, become more compassionate. And a bit of social change in there as well, because I always find that we, my criticism of mindfulness was become too insular. So everyone's looking at their own breath all the time. And actually, we need to start looking at society and making it better.
Right. So great. The book, Why Mindfulness is Not Enough, Unlocking Compassion with Equanimity, Dr. Joey Weber here in the house. Joey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'll look forward to connecting with you offline. And, I've connected with you through social media. So I'm really looking forward to learning more and growing with you. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
To be honest, Keith, I've really, every podcast's different flavor to it. And I've really I've really appreciated your questioning and also the where this went in discussion. We're talking about death. Nothing's ever come up about death before. I love that. So I appreciate being accepted on this and look forward to the connection. Yeah.
Good deal. All right. See you later.
See you, mate.
Thank you for being a part of the Mindfulness Experience podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this interesting conversation and the insights from Dr. Joey Weber. I hope he gave you insights that you need to understand equanimity and how that can support and lift up your mindfulness experience practice. We have other exciting guests coming up in the next few weeks, so please follow our podcast, connect, leave a review, suggest topics. I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on my social media platforms or visit my website at workmindfulness.com for more mindfulness experience moments. Thank you again. See you on the next show, and take care.